Hello. Welcome, everybody. This has been a bit of a confusing event to arrange when it comes to language, whether we should have it in Norwegian, English, mixed. So now the main language will be English. Some people are more comfortable talking in Norwegian, and if nobody understands, somebody don't understand Norwegian, they can sit next to me, who is there. So, yeah, but there will not be a lot in Norwegian. And if somebody totally don't understand English, they can sit next to Inge-Lise, who is where? There. Then you need to move chairs. Yeah. Okay, so I'm very happy that this conference happens. It was planned for last year, but because of COVID, we decided to wait 1 year so we can actually meet physically. And I'm really looking forward to a good debate. So this today is a public part of a research conference arranged by what we call a Nordic Network for Research on FGC, female genital cutting, circumcision. And this network has met every second year for 20 years. And some of us have been there since the start. And all the three of me, Johanna and Sara, will be here today, the ones who started the network. And so this is also the 10th conference that has been alternating between Nordic countries. And we have some special guests from US and Canada, so that's one of the reasons why we do it in English, plus that the focal members also from Finland don't speak so good Norwegian. So, yeah. So one of the reasons why we started the network, which is also one of the reasons why we chose the topic of today, which we said remaining challenges in the work against female genital cutting, mutilation, circumcision, whichever term, is that this term is, or this practice is very emotional for many people, and it's very political. And when some of us were studying our PhD, we were desperate to have a space where you can discuss this topic in a scientific way, without all the shocked reactions or just the political reactions. And this is, I feel it's still needed, but still we have taken the courage today to raise some issues that still might be sensitive for some. Just also to say that the conference is arranged by my working place, which is Norwegian Center for Studies, Norwegian Center for Violence and Traumatic Stress Studies. So we also have the national competency function for FGC research, and is funded by the Norwegian Research Council. So we wanted to discuss some topics that are still sensitive, but first I wanted to mention that my aim of today's debate is that it's open and respectful, and that we are free to be more flexible in our understanding of things. And one aspect which has been sensitive and has been discussed at length the 25 years I worked on this topic is the terminology. You're calling it female circumcision, female genital cutting, female genital mutilation. In Norwegian, we only have 2 terms, but I know the speakers have worked different places in different settings, and each word have its own connotation, but sometimes we also say another word because we are used to it, or it's easier to say. So I was hoping for understanding that people might say another word than what they actually think is right. So there are many more remaining challenges than the 2 we have today, which is very interesting because this topic of female genital cutting tends to be forgotten when other things happen. But just this last 1 week, I've been already to 2 conferences on the topic. One was on healthcare for women suffering from female genital cutting. And yesterday was a workshop on risk when traveling, or how to manage risk or assess risk. But today we have 2 panels. So the first is talking about transnational aspects of FGC. And one person in this panel got sick, so I'm removing her. So they will come after, and she will talk first, and then the rest will come after and discuss different aspects of transnational. And then we will have a short break, I think, depending on the discussion. And we'll have the second panel, which we call gray areas of genital surgery, with those people. So, welcome to you first.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Stop. Actually, I'm just a conferencier, so you don't have to clap for me. I'm not going to speak or present my amazing research, so hold on your claps for that. Thank you. So, yeah. So my name is Farhia Lul Makiro, and damn, there's a lot of you, so be kind to me. I am the conferencier for today. I'm very privileged and honored, that somebody would choose a person that is goofy as I am. And I'm just going to present myself firstly before I present the next speaker. So I'm basically 24 years old. I have a bachelor's degree in development studies, and I've been 1 year to medical schools because I'm very, very engaged in women's work and women's health and everything that has to do with women. So when I was 15, I was a part of publishing this documentary movie with NRK about female genital mutilation. So, yay me, I'm just kidding. But so basically, I'm here today because I'm very interested in this topic, and that's why I actually chose to speak up and be part of this important project. So if you guys want to talk to me afterwards, if there's anything you want to learn more about the work that I did, you're very welcome to do so. So I'm a very friendly person. Don't worry about me. So next speaker is Sophie Kukui. So welcome to Sophia Kukui. Yes, the claps.
Thank you very much for your kind introduction. It's nice to be with you this evening. I'd like to thank Elise Johansson for her kind invitation. I live in Canada, and right now we still all have our masks on, so I can't tell you how lovely it is to actually see your faces. It feels a lot warmer, and I think that especially given the topic that we're going to address tonight, it's great that we can all see each other and truly connect. Female genital cutting is a deeply entrenched cultural practice. And, while the motives tend to vary from ethnic group to another, they globally fall within the realms of sexuality, purity, honor, family, and social cohesion. These issues are pivotal, of course, in any context, but notably in the transition to motherhood. And they can, prove to be quite a conundrum in that context. On the whole, there is evidence for a general decrease in prevalence of FGC, although it doesn't offset, the increase in actual population. So there are a greater number of women at risk, women and girls, but there is a global tendency for a decrease in prevalence, and also following migration to non-practicing countries. And what this means then is that consequently there are a lot of women who have undergone the practice who are raising girls who have not been cut. Okay, and so this begs the question as to how these women who were circumcised experienced motherhood, and what becomes of transmission when a cornerstone of their culture is eschewed for the next generation. How do these women navigate the pressures of transnational family injunction to perpetuate FGC in a post-migration context is also something, that we can think about. And if the cut is a cultural marker, what is no cut a symbol of? Because the absence of something is not nothingness, and you have to think about things also as signifiers. So my talk today seeks to illuminate the evolution of FGC discourse from a transnational perspective, but also as, Russian dolls, Russisk Duker, I've been told is how you say it, to delve into dialogue at the transnational level, but also at the level of community, of the family, of mother-daughter relationship, and also of the self. So now this is quite an undertaking for a 20-minute presentation, but I hope that, I can plant some seeds for reflection and that we can then engage in a lively dialogue together. My central tenet is that the abandonment of of FGC is creating a radical shift in the modalities of cultural transmission, a reconfiguration of female social networks, and offers great potential for healing. I wanted to share with you a diagram. This is from a study that I conducted about the reasons why FGC tends to be perpetuated. So there are too many for me to go through every single bullet point, but I've segregated them in different categories. So you have purity, honor, sexuality, family and social cohesion, and as a symbol of cultural identity. Now, one of the things that you'll readily notice is that, of course, these are not in isolation. There are definitely links between the perception of purity and sexuality and honor and purity, sexuality and family and social cohesion. So we see that they're all interconnected. So as you've noticed, these motives are central life and social issues. And FGC touches upon sexuality, family, communal ties. It's also about who belongs and who's excluded, about respectability and transmission. Of course, all of these become salient in the context of the transition to motherhood and the decision to circumcise daughters or not. But they take on a specific meaning or an added meaning in the context of migration. One thing about migration is that, or one great thing I should say about migration is that it exposes you to other ways of living. And you come to question your manière d'être au monde, your way of being in the world. I think the anthropologist Alan Young said it best when he defined culture as the taken for granted. We can have different understandings or definitions of culture, but I think that's a really good one, the taken for granted. Because when you think about it, we're all a little bit like fish in the water. The fish don't realize that water is there. It's their environment. It permeates everything. And it's the same for culture. So one of the questions for any migrant group, I think, is when it comes to tradition, what do we value? What do we hold on to? Because migration, of course, involves grief as well. Grief for your home, for your homeland, for your house, for your friends, sometimes your family. And so tradition and culture can take on, an important meaning. And one of the things that I'm interested at is not only what do we value, but how does the expression of what we value change over time and through migration? African philosophy diverges in several ways from Western philosophy. Now, of course, there are points of convergence, but I think one may say that reason is the cornerstone of Western philosophy, from Descartes to Kant. One of the most famous philosophy quote is cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am, right? And when you think about it, what does it mean? It's because I think that I exist, right? Whereas in African philosophies, on the whole, it's more I am because you are, and we exist because we're interconnected. And so this relationality undergirds both African philosophy and the social ethos. So it's very much about relationships. And of course, those do not disappear in the context of migration. So in the context of migration, when FGC is perpetuated, it's often a matter of several factors. And here again, I'll come back to the idea of the Russian dolls. You'll see that they're very much linked, interconnected, and you can go from the macro to the micro. So it's often a question of belief. This is normal, this is how we've always done it, and so this is what I'm going to do for my daughters. That's one of them. Another one is allegiance to the homeland, or loyalty to one's roots. Okay? It's kind of like saying, motherland, I left, but it's not because I left that I have forgotten about our ways. And rituals provide markers for group membership. They tend to demonstrate a commitment to the group, to increase social cohesion, and they're imbued with meaning, and they ease us through transitions. And so, those rituals tend to be quite important, and some people will want to hold on to them. Another one is transnational family pressure. So there tends to be a collective involvement in maternal decisions, and that still tends to be part of contemporary social dynamics. And it really attests to the organization of the social fabric. So geographical installation by coming to the West does not preclude pressure from family members to say, you should really circumcise your daughters. It's not because you have moved away from, our home country that, the tradition should not continue. And this pressure can be quite intense. So that's definitely something to consider. Parental concerns is also one of them. Over the child's bicultural identity, raising a child who might break from traditions and norms, notably regarding autonomy, sexuality, and respect for parental authority. There's also the fear that the culture of origin will be, erased, and metaphorically about raising a child in an adopted land who might not be recognizable by the motherland. So, migrant parents have to navigate this dual pressure, both from the country of origin about perpetuating the practice and also acculturation stress. One very sensitive topic, but I think it's important to mention also in the context of FGC, is discrimination. The ontological negation of slavery, the devaluation of what originates from the Black world, is also of concerns, and it complicates the abandonment of FGC. I think it's important to consider the historical development of the fight against FGC in the West, and the fact that the first attempts to abolish FGC occurred during colonization. So, it's important to take things into context in the historical and social context, because, of course, they have ramifications to this day. So maybe this is something that we can discuss together, how to tackle FGC abandonment without reifying the past and without coming across as neocolonial. How do we do that? Because I think it's important to look at the context, of course, and I think for us as a global community, it makes us reflect about who talks, who do we listen to, and whether we live in a culture of dialogue or a culture of debate, in a culture of imposition or a patriarchal culture. I don't know how it is in Norway. I'd be very interested in knowing more about the types of dialogue that you have in Norway around FGC. But what I do know is that when people feel that their culture is devalued, when they face exclusion, discrimination, unemployment, and they feel marginalized, it can also lead them really to uphold practices that they are not really inherently favorable to. So these are all points that I wanted to mention in the migration context. I think it's also important to look at the individual level, at the level of identity. Who am I? Who am I as a mother? Which is something that all mothers will discover as they raise children. But in the case of FGC is also, who am I as a mother in a foreign land? And who am I as a mother in a foreign land who decided not to circumcise her daughter? And one of the issues, of course, is that these women who have undergone FGC and have migrated to other countries do not have a template from the previous generation to know, how to raise daughters who have not undergone the practice, right? And they don't have a template either for what it's like to not be cut. So there's an experiential facet to this that they do not have, right? And so what does the no cut represent? Well, especially for mothers who have an incarnate experience of the practice, it's about protection. Protection and vicarious protection, may I add. It's also about parental autonomy. and decision-making power. Because decision-making in an African context is very often extremely hierarchical. Okay? And so these mothers are really standing up to elders and saying, no, I will not circumcise my daughter. And this is no small feat, so I think it should also be highlighted. And so why did I choose this painting as, for the beginning of my presentation? This is a painting by Wangechi Mutu, whom I'm a huge fan of. She's a Kenyan artist, and this painting is called Yo Mama. And it's actually a tribute to Fumilayo Anikulapu Kuti, who's actually the mother of Fela Kuti, the famous singer, who you probably know of. And it turns out that she's a feminist. She was very involved as a feminist. She is said to be the first woman in Nigeria to drive a car, and she was very much against female genital cutting. And I think this is a very powerful painting which represents so many things: one land and another, feminine power or empowerment, because you see the snake here, and the woman cutting the snake with her stiletto heel. And it's also about roots and connections, right? And all of these are central, of course, when talking about female genital cutting. So when migrants from, countries, when migrants from FGC practicing countries move to another country, the question still remains as to how do they transmit their culture to their children. Okay? In other words, how do I share my culture with my daughter when she's exposed to another culture on the daily? How do I impart her with my values of cultural modesty? Now, this is where dialogue comes into play, and hence the title of my presentation, Culture and in Dialogue. These mothers are breaking several taboos. So there's the taboo of the cutting. There's also the one related to sexuality. Now, of course, this does not apply to every group that practices FGC, okay? But on the whole, it tends to be a taboo. And there's also the taboo of the hierarchy, in the sense that this is how it's done, this is how it has always been done, how your elders did it, and it's something that should not be contested nor talked about, right? Now, dialogue, and this is one of my tenets, really operationalizes the transmission of cultural modesty in a no-cut context. So transmission really is not about reifying the past. It's about taking tradition in a contemporary form, which will be relevant for the next generation. And this is adaptation. This dialogue is adaptation, and it bears many fruits. And I'm very hopeful and very glad to see all the fruits that are reaped from this transition to greater dialogue. So for one of my research studies, I interviewed 85 young adults from FGC practicing countries living in Quebec and Ontario, so living in Canada. And I asked them if they had talks with their families, especially with their parents rather, about FGC. And most of them did not. They did not have talks with their family because it was taboo. But the ones who did have talks where the parents sat down with them and told them about the practice, everyone recounted a positive experience. They said that it made them more aware of the consequences of the practice, that it helped consolidate their rejection of FGC, that it had a positive impact on the parent-child relationship, and also that it generated more openness to talk about personal topics with their family. Another advantage to dialogue is healing. Childhood trauma can stem from the absence of word, the absence of explanation. Babies and children need their parents to perform what we call the primary maternal function, which is of making sense of the world and explaining things to children and adolescents. And the purpose of that, of course, is for them to be able to grasp both their internal and external reality, right? Words can be very important important tools to metabolize our experiences. Of course, I'm a psychologist, so that's what I believe. But we know about the benefits of talking about our experiences and how it can be cathartic and healing. And I would hypothesize, actually, that both the cut and the silence around the cut can both be traumatic and painful when it comes to the practice. So here you have it. So I think a lot of mothers who engage in that dialogue with their daughters around FGC are able to work through part of their wounds through these discussions by talking about the body, talking about relationships, talking about tradition, talking about life, really, with their daughters. And it's something that takes courage. That's not easy to do because a lot of mothers, this is a very sensitive topic. And also when you talk about it with your daughter, there's always this idea of how is my daughter going to react and what gaze is she going to have on me? How is this going to change things if we have these discussions? It can be very fruitful, but it can be difficult to find the words to talk about it. But on the whole, it tends to be quite positive, of course, these discussions. And another benefit of this dialogue is the creation of circles, solidarity circles between women who have undergone the practice and who decided not to have it done to their daughters. And there's something, I think, very powerful about that there was this taboo, and there still is, around FGC, but they're breaking the taboo, not only by the fact that they did not circumcise their daughters, but also that they're talking about it together. And, they have this commitment to fighting the practice together. And so, in the context of, well, first of all, in an African context, and not exclusively African, I should say, this is the case in many parts of the world. You have a collectivization of care, where you have the biological mother, but you have also a lot of other women who are involved. And actually, I think we could say in all cultures we have that, really. Even when you think about it, sometimes it permeates through language. So for instance, in Spanish, there's actually a word to say your daughter's godmother, la comadre, right? So even in language, we find it sometimes that it's not just one woman raising a child, but it's really the collective that's coming together. And sometimes that can be lost through migration because perhaps you don't have aunts, cousins, etc. So really these circles are help you quite a bit. And I think there's great hope in those circles that these women have agencies and are fighting the practice together. Thank you. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, Sophia Kukui. There's a lot of interesting things that you mentioned, including something that I'm going to talk to you about later, which is the dialogue and the healing aspect of things, because during the war, my sister was kidnapped, actually, and she got circumcised 6 times. Even though I am not, she got circumcised 6 times. And one of the things that got her through a lot of the issues was actually this healing part of the dialogue. So I think this is very interesting, very important research you're doing. Now I'm going to introduce the panel. And it is Nene Bojang. Yes.
Where do I sit?
You can sit next to me.
Okay.
Yeah. Also just...
You can't look younger than me, though.
I know. I know, I shouldn't. It's a crime, actually. I shouldn't. Okay, and the next person is Shurika Hansen.
Hei.
Yes.
Vil du jeg skal sitte da?
Did you guys see that as the real conference here, I took water for myself and I didn't for them? I'm so sorry about that. Here you go, if you want. Okay.
That's fine.
Wonderful. Okay, so can you please just tell us a little bit about yourself before, we start with the questions and everything?
Okay. I'm Nene Bojang. I'm the founder and leader of the Inter-African Committee in Norway. And we've been working around the issues of FGM for a while. But can I just present, or is just round introduction?
Yeah, you're going to present.
Yeah, I just present, okay. I used to just a little bit by myself. Okay, yeah, basically, I will basically, coming from the Gambia, the Gambian community, and coming from Gambia, I'll just rewind back to 2008, when actually this whole thing in our community, because obviously it's an issue that's been discussed in many communities before, but for the Gambian community, the focal point came in 2008. And I think it's important to reflect it from my own perspective and not from, you know what I'm trying to say, and not just generalize. But I remember that evening was living in my own bubble as usual, feeling privileged to be in Norway, well-educated, a background that was, I would consider privileged, traveling around the world with my dad, who was an ambassador, a master's degree. You know what I mean? I was thinking, oh my God, I'm really having it good at this moment. So I was, as usual, came from work, settled down to a program on Nollywood to just cobble out badass Rita Dominic, you know, that
basically,
type of thing.
Nollywood, it's like Hollywood just for like Nigeria.
Cobbled out. And then the phone was just ringing incessantly. It's like everybody's suddenly calling me from everywhere. I'm like, oh my God, what's happening? I picked up the phone and then I was told, tune into NRK. Tune into NRK. I said, but why? He says, you cannot live in Norway, live in a bubble and not listen to the daily news. Turn on the TV. Okay. So I turned on the TV and there it was, a Gambian couple that were basically arrested for having performed FGM on their daughter. The shock, do you know what I'm trying to say? And the wake-up call at that point. I was basically like, well, went into the process of denial because I could not believe that FGM was a human rights violation, nor a crime, because my vagina was functioning well, I had children well, and I never thought that there was absolutely anything wrong with me at all. Exactly. So how can that be a human rights violation? So then obviously the ideology that this is Western feminism, you know what I mean, what are they talking about? All those thoughts came. So I went through the process of anger, denial, and then the process of anger, well, maybe, reflected around it and said, okay, maybe something, read about it, and then went through that process of anger at how could my mom and my grandmother and grandmother, how could they have done this to me? Then the process of, again, forgiveness, okay, they didn't know better. That's maybe why it was done to me. And then the process of, what can I do to prevent others in doing this? So those are the things that we went through as a community, and I feel that most people went through those processes again, you know what I'm trying to say, and worked on it in that way. How it culminated is that now we have what we call Afro-European methods for empowerment, whereby we combine the European settings and the African settings and the drums and stuff to work out these issues that we have within our community. And for those two children that went through this process, I would say that we've succeeded as a community because they now are leading the youth groups against FGM and things regularly on a yearly basis, basically. Thank you.
Beautiful. Very good. Yes, thank you so much for sharing that. I can see it's very personal to you, obviously. You know, you're also sharing something vulnerable with us. So I really appreciate you taking this space, and like with all of these strangers that have no idea, actually, including me. So it's an honor, actually. Yeah. And Shurika Hansen, do you want to touch upon your subject and introduce yourself?
Det min tur til å presentere meg selv. Jeg tar det på norsk, siden vi nå bor i Norge. Jeg ble invitert og syntes det var veldig hyggelig. Var ikke helt sikker på at vi hadde endret språk fra norsk til engelsk. Så presentasjonen min nå på norsk. Jeg har vært samfunnsdebattant i noen år nå, og har spesielt vært veldig opptatt av unge innvandrerkvinner, siden jeg en selv. Jeg var med på en todelt dokumentar som heter Arbeid nok. Der i den dokumentaren der vi prøver å vise hele Norge alt det mange av oss har prøvd å si hele tiden, at det en del integrering som ikke fungerer i Norge, og særlig når det gjelder kvinners rettigheter. Det jeg aller mest opptatt av at vi innvandrerkvinner skal ha nøyaktig de samme rettighetene som alle andre. Jeg tenker at vi har kommet til et land der vi veldig privilegerte. Du snakket om å være privilegert. Jeg vokste opp i Skien, hadde det veldig fint. Måtte ikke bruke noe, det var ingen som tvang meg til å hverken gå med hijab eller gifte meg med en bestemt person eller noe av det. Men så vokste jeg opp og la merke til at det var veldig mange andre jenter som ikke hadde de samme privilegiene som jeg hadde. Det var veldig mange andre jenter som måtte gjennom en del sanksjoner som guttene slapp. Og det var veldig mange som opplevde både tvangsekteskap, omskjæring, kulturrehabilitering. Det var veldig mye vold i hjemmet. Og litt av det kjenner jeg meg jo igjen i, men jeg slapp også veldig unna med mye, fordi faren min var først og fremst ganske liberal, han var veldig vestlig av seg. Og så vokste han opp i en tid der faktisk før borgerkrigen, der Somalia var veldig sekularisert, så jeg har vært veldig heldig den tiden. Så skrev jeg vel min første artikkel om hvordan det å være innvandrerkvinne i Norge i NRK for 7, 8, 9 år siden. Og da kom det jo masse. Da kom det mye hat rettet mot meg som kvinne. Og det var veldig mye rasisme. Det var veldig mye du vil bare ha oppmerksomhet. Dette skjer ikke i vårt miljø. Det var masse trusler. Det var mye dette ikke sant. Det stemmer ikke. Så det var det. Og det var de som ble sett, og de som ble lagt merke til. Men så var det veldig mange jenter og gutter som skrev til meg. Jeg opplever dette. Jeg går gjennom dette. Dette nesten livet mitt, og da måtte jeg ta et valg. Der og da skal jeg se på alle disse her som truer meg, som kommer med masse usaklighet, som prøver å ta friheten min, eller skal jeg faktisk bestemme meg for at disse jentene og guttene, de som skriver til meg, dette livet mitt daglig, det de jeg har lyst til å ta den kampen for. Så bestemte jeg meg for at når alle kvinner frie, da har vi total frihet. Når ingen kvinner frie på noen miljøer, da har vi ingen frihet. Og dermed bestemte jeg meg for at jeg kan ikke bare trekke stigen etter meg. Jeg fri, jeg har det veldig fint, men det mange som ikke har det i Norge. Så begynte jeg å undersøke litt i litt forskjellige artikler. Da jeg vokste opp, så var det ingen som meg. Jeg fra Somalia forresten. Jeg kan vedde 100% på at dere aldri har møtt en somalisk eks-muslim. Her har dere en. I tillegg til det så har jeg vært gift med en norsk mann. I tillegg til det så spiser jeg gris og drikker alkohol. Så det liksom veldig mye med meg som ikke typisk somalier, og dermed høster det mye kritikk. Men så det jo den friheten vi har, ikke sant? Det den friheten vi har kommet til, og den jeg veldig opptatt av. Så da jeg engasjerte meg mer i dette, så la jeg mer merke til at det var noe som het kulturrehabilitering. I mitt miljø så var det noen dro hjem til bestemor til sommeren noen ganger. De kom ikke tilbake på lenge. Men da jeg undersøkte det enda mer, så var det faktisk ikke bare kulturrehabilitering, altså sendt tilbake til hjemlandet for å lære mer om kulturen, men mange av disse jentene og guttene, veldig mange jenter, de ble tvangsgiftet, også de omskåret. Det var mange som opplevde vold. Veldig mye av det jeg skrev om i 2017 som NRK også har avslørt, en barbarisk måte å straffe barn og ungdommer på når de ikke passer til det narrativet som foreldrene har bygd. Da ble det enda klarere og tydeligere for meg at vi har et kjempestort problem i Norge. For den delen av program som jeg skal snakke om i dag, det jo det som ikke fungerer i integreringen. Og det jo dette med omskjæring. Vi har eksperter her i dag som kan vise til tall og mye, men det de ikke får med seg jo disse ungdommene som tar kontakt med samfunnsdebattanter, folk som har vært på TV, folk som skriver artikler, fordi de skal fortelle om de svarte tallene, de tallene som ingen andre får tak i. Og det er disse ungdommene som jeg tenker i dag, at hvis det er noe jeg kan bidra med, så er det å tale for dem, for det har ikke de mulighet til.
Thank you for that, yeah. Yeah, so you're looking like a question mark. You're like, what the hell did she just say? Girl, I got you. So basically, in summary, in very, very quick summary in English, I just wanted to say that she shared basically what, that she's not the typical Somali person, and that, a lot of, the work that she's done with FGM has had consequences because of the fact that she's the person that she is. And the kids that she has been in contact with, they really want her help, and they're like applauding her for whatever she's doing. But there's a lot of also people in the society, specifically, I hope that you touch upon specific groups, because there's a lot of ethnical Norwegians here thinking like, damn, we suck, but it might not be you. So there's also about this work that she's done with the documentary, and we can watch it, can't we?
Yes, you can. On Discovery Plus and TV Norge.
Yeah, so that is very great. So I'm just gonna, that was a fair translation. I'm very, very sorry.
Good well.
But okay, so maybe I can just continue with the questions. And you guys can also write down any questions that you have, and I'm sure that they would love, okay, I'm talking, putting words in your mouth, but maybe answer for, people if they have questions later in the pause and anything, yeah? So I just want to understand first and foremost, you spoke about, like I said, this dialogue part of healing. Is it anything in your research that indicates what kind of dialogue and with who, right? People say that therapists, that will help, but I've also had personally like a mother that couldn't talk with ethnical therapists because of the lack of knowledge for culture, So these mothers that you're talking about and these people, can you explain like what kind of dialogue is the healing?
Great question. So the dialogue, well, the dialogue is of course not exclusive to mother-daughters. Of course, it can be aunties, grandmothers, but also men, right? Fathers. And when it comes to healing, so there are informal talks and more formal talks, we'll say. So the informal talks, and I'm basing myself, yes, as a researcher, as a university professor, but also as a clinician, because I work with women who have undergone female genital cutting, both individually and with group therapy. And some of the things that they mention is, let's say, they will meet up during, events for the community, and at some point, let's say the women will all be together, and what do you know? The topic of FGC comes up. Surprise, surprise. And then they will say, for instance, I chose not to do it for my daughter. Oh, me neither, I didn't. Me neither. Oh, okay, no. We all agree that we will not do this, and the fact that they took this decision and that they talk about it and they have this dialogue around, this decision tends to be healing because they don't feel alone, because they feel it's something that they can talk about and that they feel support. We all need to have a sense of community.
Exactly,
right?
Exactly, yeah.
So, and it's also brave to defy tradition, and sometimes even if you're determined not to do it, the fact that there are other women like you who have undergone the same practice and, who decide to do that can be healing.
Yeah, that's what I find interesting that you say, because I was doing an internship in the women's clinic, actually the maternity ward here in Oslo University Hospital. And I thought just like this, like my mom also said, no, I need somebody that I can relate with, to talk about these things with, because it's healing, like you said. And so we had a woman that was actually circumcised in the clinic, and she was or in the hospital, and she was gonna give birth. So I was thinking, oh, great, I'm assigned to help her, right? But then it turns out that while I was getting the things and the sterilizations and everything, she actually requested me gone because she didn't want me, as somebody that could kind of relate, to be in the same space. So this is very tricky, right? I'm thinking, I've always thought like you did, and so, but it can also be the opposite, that because you look like them and that you are maybe even from the same country, that it's not always going to be that effect of, kinship and, that community that you're talking about. I think that is very interesting too. Have you also looked into that maybe? Did anybody of your informants talk about this?
Talk about not wanting to talk about it with other community members?
Yeah, like their community, within their community. Is it hard to talk about it within their community with people that look like them? Can that also be actually challenging?
It can happen, but people talk. They talk a lot. So you tend to know, of course, you never really know.
Yeah.
But, you know who tends to be more in favor of, who doesn't, who sent the children, back home during the summer to have it done. But it's true that sometimes people will want to keep to themselves, especially if there's a lot of trauma there that can happen too. And in that specific instance that you're talking about, of course, I wasn't there, so I don't know, but it's also perhaps, I don't know, a difference in generation.
Yeah.
Maybe she wondered how you would perceive her,
Yeah, sure.
as a young professional as well.
It can also be it. There's so many factors, so it's like an always gray area sometimes, Yeah, so, and I want to touch upon something that you said, and I'm kind of confused now because I don't know if I should speak Norwegian or if I should speak English. Yeah, so I was wondering about this, the work that you have done. Can you tell us about how, for instance, in your perception, how mothers and fathers in Norway can make sure that their kids will not get circumcised if they go to the home country? Is there anything the people that are here can do,
Det veldig interessant, for det som at veldig mange tenker at disse mødrene og fedrene som sender barna sine på kulturrehabilitering, eller som sender til hjemmelandet for å enten bli omskåret eller andre ting, at de onde. Og det det vi må prøve å få avklart, at her det en kulturfrykt. Disse rett og slett redd for at barna deres skal bli noe de anser som ødelagt, ikke sant? Det vestlige synet de har på dem. Det fritt alkohol, fritt sex, fritt one night stands, alt det der. Og det de redde for. De redde for at barna deres skal gå over på en moralsk stige som de ikke har vært en del av. Så I stedet for å da på en måte straffe disse foreldrene med mange sanksjoner, så bør vi kunne på forhånd lære de andre måter å gjøre ting på. Og det det at det veldig viktig at både mødre og fedre får vite om kvinners rettigheter. Den der, altså at de har alle jenter og altså gutter, de må kunne ha muligheten til å bestemme over egen kropp. Det må vi lære dem. Og så må vi lære dem at det ikke feil å bli for vestlig. Ikke sant? Og så gi det en helt ny definisjon på hva det vil si å være vestlig. Ikke bare det de forbinder med vestlig. Så det der med å forhindre at sånne ting skal skje, det må skje allerede I integreringen. Og en annen ting jeg vil si om disse mødrene jeg har jo hatt mødre som har kontaktet meg, som faktisk veldig positive til de tingene jeg sier. En mamma som ringte meg, dette var en annen diskusjon, det handlet om barnehijab, hun sier til meg, men søster, hvis det hadde vært ikke lov I Norge, og kle på barna mine hijab, så kunne jeg sagt til de andre naboene og de andre som tvinger meg til å si, det ikke lov I Norge. Akkurat som det ikke lov å slå barn, så sier jeg til naboer og andre, det ikke lov å slå barn I Norge, derfor slår jeg ikke barna mine. Så alle trenger retningslinjer, man trenger opplæring, og man trenger forståelse. For det ene jo den kulturelle bagasjen, der de må høre på, altså noen ganger så blir det bestemt over tanter og bestemødre, det hierarkiet som vi snakket om I sted, fra hjemmelandet. Noen blir bestemt over der. De ringer og sier, hei, hun omskjært? Hei, har hun begynt med det der? Hei, har hun gjort alt det der? Det det vi må jobbe med. Altså folk blir bestemt fra der. Og så det mange som ikke føler seg inkludert I det samfunnet de har kommet til. Og når de ikke føler seg inkludert I det samfunnet de har kommet til, så bare dras de mot det samfunnet de kommer fra. Så disse mødrene og fedrene, de har det veldig vanskelig. Det ikke lett. Og så må vi bare prøve å fokusere på generasjonsskiftet. Vi må bryte I disse altså tingene som skjer med de barna, det må vi bryte I. Og eneste måten å gjøre det på, det å ha mer opplæring til de foreldrene. Veldig bra det arbeidet dere gjorde på det sykehuset. Veldig bra med slike seminarer, og veldig bra at man har fokus på at dette skjer fortsatt. Det skjer. Jeg har jenter som kontakter meg, som livredde for sommerferien. Og så mai og starten av juni så det alltid telefoner, e-poster, ting som kommer til meg. Jenter som vet Lillesøstera mi, hun skal til Somalia, hun skal til Sudan. Lillesøstera mi, det kommer til å skje med henne. Jenter som ringer meg og sier, jeg ble tatt i å røyke med noen andre, så jeg kommer, ikke sant? Sommerferien er en forferdelig tid. Alle ferier er det. Så eneste måten å gjøre det på, det er å få det inn i integreringsprogrammene.
Okay, so basically what you're saying is that we, to fight this, to make sure that children, girls, are not circumcised when they go to their home of origin, it's to educate people and it's to basically have seminars like these and to educate the parents.
Yes.
Because the integration process here in Norway is not maybe set up to actually make sure that this happens, you know? Because what you were touching upon, Sophia, is that when somebody has a culture, you said that they also will just be like, okay, this is our culture, so that's why we do it. And that's what you are saying here, to draw the parallel, is that as long as the minority is not feeling welcome and well integrated in the majority culture, it's going to lead to them going to keep their culture like this and to think like this is what we have. This is the only pride that they're going to
Vi snakker ofte om at barna er mellom to stoler, ikke sant? Men det er jo jammen foreldrene også. De er mellom to stoler, de også.
Yeah, that's very, very true. That makes me so happy that you said. Because we normally forget, you know, we normally think about the kids and that they're like falling about between cultures and identities, but also the parents are struggling with falling between identities and cultures as well. So, and, you know, while we're talking about parents, I want to touch upon, you told us about your father and how he was a liberal and highly educated. You know, you came from a very educated family, traveling and everything. And how is it I want you to tell everyone that we have this perception maybe of female genital mutilation, and that the people that perform this are, you know, above, you know, not educated enough. They don't know what they're doing. Maybe it is even words like, I really dislike, barbaric. We use those kind of words, and I think it's a very problematic term. But can you tell us how it is to come from a highly educated family and still experience female genital cutting?
Yeah, I think that's why I brought it in, because the couple that were arrested, they had no education.
Exactly.
And I'm here in Norway, well educated, working at NAV. Do you know what I mean? I should be integrated. I should know that these things are not. But it's not something that, it's not an information that we got.
No.
Until 2008, people got. So there was a lot of work at that time within the Somali communities, but the rest of the country didn't know what was happening. So FGM, and I was actually at that, my daughter was 12 that year, and I was actually thinking that I'm planning next summer, when she's 13, we've got to do this. So it has actually got nothing to do with your educational background, your financial background.
Exactly.
It's a cultural thing.
Say it louder for the people in the back. I'm just kidding.
It has nothing, absolutely nothing to do with your educational background, your financial background. It's a cultural thing. It's been taboo. And it's just something that my mother did it to my mother, my grandmother, great-great-grandmother did it to my grandmother did it to my grandmother, my grandmother did it to my mother did it to me, and I was expected to do it to Sally, and Sally is expected to do it to her daughters, and it continues like this. It's not without thinking, it's not because it's out of evilness.
Or anything to do with religion.
Anything to do with religion.
Exactly.
It was just expected.
It was expected, yeah.
So I was saved by that family. It could have been me arrested, in prison.
Yeah. Because actually we think about, you know, newspapers and things that are negative about these, the minority groups when they come in the newspaper, like you have also touched upon, you know, we also always think about, oh no, this is gonna hurt the people. It's going to hurt the Gambian community, you know. But in fact, it saved you. It saved, you know, probably a lot of people that don't talk about this.
Absolutely.
So for me, it's very important to touch upon the fact that education and culture sometimes don't intertwine at all. And I am thinking about fathers, because when I was doing this field trip in Tanzania and Somalia with this documentary, I remember that I spoke to a lot of men, and they said that they didn't want this to happen to their daughters, because they were not actually thriving with their wives as they should. So what do you guys think about fathers? What kind of role do the actual father have in this FGM?
I just want to touch on that. That is quite an important aspect of the men, because I remember during the Ban FGM campaign, to get that resolution through the United Nations, we had to actually push to go and make sure the African heads of state, the African Union heads of states that were sitting at the UN, we showed them the process of their daughters being going through female genital mutilation. And that was the same year that we got the resolution of the United Nations. So immediately the fathers knew what was going on.
Very good.
They said, no way.
Yeah. You know, seeing something as brutal as FGM can actually be a wake-up call.
And that's what happened.
Yeah. I personally said no thank you when the documentary producer said, we're going to go to a hut and that you're going to see this girl being cut. I said no, because that was something NRK was going to show you guys. And I said, sometimes talking about it is just enough. But in this case, in this instance, it was necessary. Yeah, what do you think about what kind of role the fathers have in FGM?
It's complicated.
It's complicated, yeah.
And they don't all share the same perspective, for sure. A lot of men, as you very well mentioned, are against it, because of they see the repercussions in their family life. And one thing that sometimes we perhaps don't consider enough is that patriarchy is not just about male domination. There's a whole structure in place, and hierarchy falls into that, right? And so if a man says, I don't want my daughters to be circumcised, yes, of course it has great weight. And studies have shown that when men get involved, there tends to be a decrease in prevalence. But these men also have fathers, and they have uncles, and
voices around them.
Exactly. So it can be complicated. But there are, and I've worked with women whose father is actually the one who decided to protect them and to contact the whole family when they were born. I'm thinking of this one instance of a father who sent a letter to his family and his wife's family to say, I'm going to be a father, and I don't want this for my daughter. So
that's amazing, actually.
And it didn't happen.
Yeah, that's very good. And I'm thinking, like, for instance, right now we're talking about, this is a very important seminar. Obviously, it's a part of maybe being a part of changing a person's perspective or educating. That's all great. But I'm also wondering, like, what do you think about actually implementing these things that we're talking about? How can we prevent, I want to say, like, the transnational community, in the fight of FGM, but since we're in Norway, we should maybe talk about how can Norway and who in Norway can educate and do these and implement these things actually.
I Norge så har vi mange organer som kan faktisk bidra. Det aller første jo helsestasjonen. Når en kvinne kommer og gravid, så vi veldig opptatt av alltid å ta vitaminsjekk. Vi alltid å ta, hvis hun overvektig, så tar man sikkert sånn sukkerbelastning, og så det mye vi gjør. Men jeg tenker at hvis vi hadde startet med og snakket med den kvinnen om venter du en jente, hva tenker du om omskjæring? Altså at man ikke redd, fordi vi veldig redde for å fornærme andres kulturer i Norge. Vi har en sånn skamkultur innad innvandrerkulturen, der vi skammer oss over vår egen kultur, og så nordmenn redde for å fornærme vår kultur, så vi går rundt og skammer oss hverandre, og det ikke bra. Og det som at det veldig mange av de jentene som kontakter meg, de blir jo sviktet både fra det miljøet de kommer fra, og det norske samfunnet, ikke sant? Minoritetssamfunnet og majoritetssamfunnet. Så her det barn og ungdommer som lider av det. For det første så det helsestasjonene. Når en kvinne gravid, så bør det inn i alt annet av sjekk som man tar. Legene bør ikke være redde for å sjekke. Jeg har jobbet som tolk i 14 år. Det der med at helsestasjoner og leger skal sjekke småjenter, det stemmer ikke alltid. Det et fåtall av de som jeg har sett og tolket for, som faktisk sjekker disse småjentene. Når en mor sier nei, så det nei. Og det den der, ikke sant, hva heter det, altså angsten for å fornærme noen, den triumferer over en jentes rettigheter. Helsestasjoner, leger, og så det alle disse her som holder barselkurs, ikke sant? De kan ta det inne der også. Men da må vi også utdanne alle disse her helsepersonellet som skal møte de personene. Det må vi gjøre. Vi bør også prøve å ha litt flere artikler. Nå har det vært noen enkelte sjeler som har skrevet om dette. De har blitt kalt rasist, nazist, muslimhater, alt mulig, altså inkludert meg. Og da trekker man seg og tenker, oi, jeg vil ikke være sånn, jeg er ikke sånn. Så man blir skremt fra det. Og hvem er det som skremmer de da? Det er de som er redde for at disse tingene skal komme ut. Så vi har brukt lang tid nå på å snakke om dette. Vi innvandrere har vært her siden 1970, 1967, 1968. Og vi har hatt problemer som blir økende. De blir ikke mindre. Og da må vi ha et annen måte å gjøre det på. Ikke sant? Vi må ikke være redde for å ta opp ting. NRK har vel hatt noen dokumentarer om det, men det må ikke slutte der. Fordi det blir født nye jenter hele tiden, det blir født nye gutter hele tiden. Vi blir flere. Og da må det være mer informasjon. Så ikke nordmenn må være mindre redde for å komme til oss innvandrere og snakke om ting, og innvandrere må slutte å snakke med seg selv. De må liksom lenger ut i samfunnet, storsamfunnet.
It's actually very true that we can't go around and being ashamed of, our own culture and exposing, the dirty laundry, maybe, as somebody would call it. And then the Norwegians may be too afraid because they're raised with janteloven, which is like, who do you think you are? Come in here, tell me this.
Så har vi berøringsangsten, ikke sant? Så vi berører ikke andre kulturer. Hvis dere omskjærer, du er fra Gambia, hvis dere gjør det i deres land, ikke sant? Vi vil ikke fornærme deres kultur, så berøringsangsten i nordmenn, politikere har det, leger har det, helsesøstre har det, IMDi har det, alle har det. Alle.
It's very interesting though, because I'm thinking like, it's very important to talk about it, and we can't not be afraid of touching upon each other's culture, and it takes one dialogue, but done properly, from a non-judgmental view. But I'm also thinking like, I find it also sometimes problematic when, for instance, family reunion happens, or somebody is they got married with somebody in their home country, and this woman is coming to Norway, and things like that. Like, how can we minimize the risks for not also stereotyping groups? Because I was a medical student, I used to receive these tidsskriftene. That is like for doctors and medical students and whatnot. And there was this huge poster where it said, kvinnelig kjønnslemlestelse, FGM. And then there was this girl, brown-skinned with a hijab. This perception of people that are coming also to Norway. How can we also minimize this risk of not falling into the stereotyping trap?
Altså, stereotyper, de finnes uansett, ikke sant? Vi kan ikke unngå dem.
How can we minimize it?
Vi kan minimalisere ved at jeg mener at, veldig mange mener at man skal legge ansvar over på storsamfunnet. Det er de som har makten, det er de som har kunnskapen, men det er jo ikke sant. Vi i minoritetssamfunnet, vi har mye makt og kunnskap, vi også. Så vi går ut og sier, dette er vårt problem. Vi fikser opp i dette, vi tar ansvar for dette, og så kan de som har den kunnskapen bli med oss og gjøre det. For jeg tror at veldig mange, når man faktisk tar ansvar for sitt eget liv og sine egne ting, så blir det mindre. Veldig mange, ikke sant, det var mange år jeg ikke turte å si at jeg var fra Somalia, ikke sant, også Nav-klient og mange barns mor. Jeg jobbet netter, turnus, og så var jeg på lekeplassen med barna mine på dagen. Jeg turte ikke å si til de hvor jeg var fra, for jeg var redd for at folk skulle stigmatisere og si hun er fra Somalia, hun har sikkert ikke jobb, selv om jeg jobbet netter og helger og ettermiddager, ikke sant? Så det var den der, så vi kan aldri unngå det der stigma eller måten å gjøre det på, men jeg tror hvis det er flere fra innvandrerkulturen som kommer ut og sier, vet du hva, vi har vært der lenger nå, vi tar skittentøysvasken nå, vi tar den. Ikke kritisere de som sier noe om det. Ikke drive og stemple de som skriver om det som rasister. Vi må ta det innenfra. Arbeidet må komme innenfra. Det må det. Det eneste måten vi kan lykkes på, det er at vi tar oppgjør og sier at dette går ikke. Ok, det er ikke religiøst betinget, akkurat som i jødene, ikke sant, og omskåre gutter. Det er ikke noe religiøst bak det. Hvis vi er enige om det, så er det et ukultur. Man kan ikke bruke kulturen som en unnskyldning.
Yeah, so basically what you're saying is that to actually minimize the factors of discrimination and stereotyping and judgment, we need to, the minority culture where this is being touched upon, this culture specifically, we are the ones that need to go out and spread the word and spread the awareness. But also, she's saying that we kind of need y'all, in Norway, the majority culture, to be our alliances. We need that. We need you guys by our side to fight this as well. So it's basically who stands up first in the front row is the minority group themselves. Yes. But the army is y'all, you know, the Norwegians and the community and the government. So very, very thank you for that. And what do you think, Nene?
I think absolutely. I think what we've done is a combination of what it says. I think the government of Norway has been critical in that. The ethnic Norwegians also have, because obviously through the ethnic Norwegian company, NK Hvitevest specifically, that engaged us together with Health Directorate to give us this information, because we didn't know it. You know what I mean, basically. And then Bufdir and Velferdsetaten has also, over these, since 2008, supported us regularly. But Bufdir has been specifically helpful because they've allowed us to work in the transnational dimension. And how do we do that? We bring in state actors, policy people who in the Gambia, opposition leaders, we bring them every year into Norway and we discuss these issues that we're having, telling them that if the laws don't change, if attitudes don't change in the Gambia, we are continuing to having problems here, we'll be locked up. So we have that transnational dimension, but obviously the government of Norway has been supportive in that.
That's great.
So that's what's made us as a community be able to come together and just to work on it. And these young people that now have taken up these responsibility platforms or accountability platforms against harmful traditions, one of them actually did the bravest thing. She thought she was recently forced, that same family again, recently forced to marry. And she felt that she had to be brave enough so that her kids, her younger sisters could be protected, reported the parents.
Wow. Oh,
That's the latest case, and it's our community again.
Yeah, it's...
But it shows that the work, it's been since 2008, but they felt that they were empowered enough to say that this is a human rights violation.
Yeah.
It's my mom or my dad. But if I don't take this risk, my younger sisters are going to go through this.
Yeah, exactly. That's a powerful girl.
She is.
To be honest, yeah. And like in a closing statement, we're basically kind of running out of time. I really love to talk about this. I'm getting very engaged. But as just the closing arguments, like, do you have, let me start with you. Do you have any, no, Sophia, let me start with you. Do you have any like a 30-second or 1 minute that you want to say? Something that you, if y'all slept, they should at least wake up to and listen, you know? Is there anything you want to tell us about your work or this topic that we should take home?
I would say 30 seconds.
Or a minute. Go for it. I can be generous. Okay.
A take-home message. I would say to just continue to question. Just to continue to question what we do, how we do it, so that we, always do it with compassion, and that we always strive to understand the complexities of this issue, and that I think through dialogue, real dialogue, when we take the time to listen to one another, I think that will very much help bring fruits to this fight that we have, this common fight against the practice.
I totally agree, actually. And also, if you guys didn't know, the best leaders in the world actually are the ones that are most empathic. Like, for instance, I have a mentor, and his name is Leol Mekonnen. He's right there. I just wanted to say that the people that actually move things are the people that move the hearts. And if you guys as individuals, Leol is one individual, but imagine as like people, we actually practice more compassion. Because with compassion, we feel it. It's an energy. And then that's when dialogue happens, which you're also talking about. So we can't have dialogue with non-compassionate people. We're going to run out. So it's kind of important. Thank you for that. Amazing. What about you?
30 sekunder.
1 minute, I'm generous.
Det veldig bra å være empatisk, det veldig bra å være forståelsesfull, det veldig bra å gi folk både tid og ressurser og mye av det. Men Norge har gjort det siden 1970-tallet, ikke sant? Når det gjelder integreringen, mangel på integrering, så har Norge, storsamfunnet, har bidratt med mye for å gjøre det. Vi har fått tilrettelagt så mye i form av ressurser, i form av kunnskap, i form av muligheter, i form av tid. Det har storsamfunnet gjort. Nå er det vår tur til å si, ok, tusen takk for alle disse 10 årene med muligheter. Nå legger vi den saken død, nå skal vi jobbe med det. Det er det jeg hele tiden står ved, at vi innvandrere som har kommet hit, det er vi som har ansvar for våre liv. Vi kan ikke legge det overfor på storsamfunnet. Så nå mener jeg at storsamfunnet skal holde litt igjen på litt av ressursene og litt av det, og så skal vi gjøre litt av arbeidet. Akkurat, jeg har barn, og jeg sier alltid til dem, jeg har fått dere så langt, resten må dere gå selv. Og det er akkurat sånn jeg mener at vi skal behandle de utfordringene med integrering som foregår nå.
So basically, for people that didn't understand that, she said minority culture, get the up. I said get the up because I can't curse, but she said go, get up. Okay, that's good. So what would you say as a closing argument?
I would say as a closing argument is that most of us with multicultural backgrounds and comes from, we try to, like she rightly said when she made her presentation, we like to hold on to what we think is a part of our culture and our identity. And most of us, unfortunately, I was no exception, live in a bubble. So whilst much of the responsibility should be on us to be able to address these issues as a community, I think humanity as a whole, we're one. And it's only together as looking at that humanity perspective that we can deal with all of this. So I think everybody has to continue to be as engaged as they are. For NCO, VTL, Salsa Directorate, the government in general. I think it's only through that eyes that we can lift each other up as humanity.
That's very, very true. Yeah, togetherness makes something happen. That's very, very true. If you want to, what do they say? When you want to go fast, you go alone. You want to go far, you go together. So I absolutely agree with this. And I know that I can't get like a closing statement, but eventually I just wanted to say, okay, holy shit, you guys are amazing. You guys are such power women. Honestly, I'm it's very amazing for me. Yeah. Each and one of you. So thank you so much. I'm learning so much, and you guys obviously don't know what I'm feeling right now, but I'm feeling like goosebumps, you know? And if I was white, you could see that I'm turning red and stuff. Oh. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
So basically she said a break and we're gonna eat something. So get up, get energy, you know, maybe dance, maybe not, but okay, yeah, whatever.
Hello, is this working? Yes. I need. Time has come to the break is over, so now we have to go to the second panel, which we have called the gray zones of between FGC and cosmetic genital surgery, and also male circumcision or other genital surgeries. So one of the reasons why we wanted to have this panel is that this has been very hotly debated in scientific circles and a little bit in politics and in legal issues also. And the whole challenge has to do with how you word and how you define different practices and who is defining it. So the definition of FGM, I'm having the slides in Norwegian because I'm speaking in English, so that both languages could understand. So the WHO definition of FGM is all procedures, including partial or total removal of the external genitalia or other injury to female genital organs for non-medical purposes. And the Norwegian law basically say it is procedures in a woman's genital organs that harms or causes lasting changes, yeah? And reconstruction of FGC is punished in the same way, and that means reinfibulation. And there is no, consent does not exempt from punishment. So if you look at the formulation of the law and the definition of FGM, you would think that this covers the same type of practices, which it doesn't do in reality. So according to the wording of the Norwegian law, cosmetic genital surgery should be illegal, but it's not. And some also argue that circumcision of boys should be illegal, and that both genders need to be protected by the law. But when you talk to lay people, I've not discussed this at length, they generally think that these two practices are totally different and that it's self-evident. You don't need to explain, you don't need to, it's just like a shock reaction when I say that there are some unclear distinctions. And then we wonder how, or one of the questions is how can then, for example, a doctor decide whether a requested procedure in the genitalia is considered FGM and he's not allowed to perform it, or it should be considered cosmetic surgery and then he's allowed to perform it. So the panel that will come later will explore different aspects. But first, before they come, I wanted to give a short overview because I suppose most people who are here know about female genital cutting. I don't know how much they know about cosmetic surgery, but I will still give a little bit, because there is a lot of aspects. It's the issue of age and consent, it's the issue of meaning and motivation, but it's also the question of the anatomical extent or the physical part of the procedure. So the WHO differentiates between 4 types of FGM. So in this is normal genitalia, and the areas that are colored are the ones that are touched upon in different types of FGM. So if you do type 1 FGM, which is called clitoridectomy, you remove maybe some part of or all of the external part of the clitoral glands and or the prepuce. If you also remove the labia minora or you remove the labia minora, then it's defined as type 2. If you also touch the labia majora, or you can do that in type 2 also, but if you also cut labia minora, labia majora, and you close it by stitching, then it's called type 3, which is infibulation, and it's the most extensive form. And what confuses many is that type 4 is then the less serious form. I didn't put that here, which is, have I written it? Type 4 is, I haven't written it. It's written later. But the point is that this typology is defined by WHO according to the body anatomy. It is not that you have gone and examined women and checked how these different types of FGM actually happen in practice. It is more that, okay, if they touch this part, then we call it this. If they touch this part, we call it this. It's basically with infibulation that there are some extent of studies exploring what is actually being done. But the type 1 and 2 and type 4 is much less studied. Cosmetic genital surgeries are described in much more detail, and I do not have time to go into that. But what people think usually when we start to raise these two practices next to each other is that this is totally opposite. For example, if you can think of, it's not even cosmetic surgery, but tattooing and piercing in the genitals. is a very mild infringement, and they sometimes compare this with the most severe type of FGM, which is removing a lot of tissue and closing it up. But you also have other procedures that you have labia correction, reduction of the labia, labiaplasty, and you have correction. They call it correction. Even the terminology means that there's something wrong because it needs to be corrected. So correction of the labia or removing excess skin, which also indicates as if there is excess skin. So terminology does matter. But then there's still a big difference, but there is a changing balance of severity or harm. So if you add more types of FGM, and you have type 4, which I said, which is here, then harmful procedures of non-medical reasons, like pricking, piercing, they call it nicking, scraping, or burning, which is more close to the mildest form of acceptable procedure in Western countries. And also ritual circumcision of boys. And then you have, if you have all the types, then the balance is, because also with the cosmetic genital surgery, you have procedures that tighten the vagina, which is one of the purposes of infibulation. So then I'm thinking that this balance is less clear. And I think the panelists will talk about all these aspects as well as other parts of this. So I give the word to, I don't know if Faria should introduce you or first.
You can just say her name. Du kan bare si navnet henne, så kan hun gå opp.
Sara Johnsdotter, vær så god.
So, thank you for inviting me to say very briefly something about the academic discussions when it comes to different genital modifications. So this is how it's discussed by scholars. And I'm going to give you a minute just to look at the 4 different procedures that I'm going to talk about. I hope you had time to have a look. So now I'm going to compare FGMC with the 3 other in pairs. And I'm going to start by saying something about circumcision of girls and boys. Practically in all countries of the world where girls are circumcised, boys are circumcised too. The reverse is not true. We have many countries where only boys are circumcised. Actually, 1/3 of the male population of the world. And it's legal everywhere in the world. Oh, something happened, sorry. That was a very brief presentation. I'll try to stay away from the keys. So, in local settings where there are rituals for boys and girls, they are seen as symmetrical practices. And I think terminology often proves this. In local languages, often the same word is used for circumcision of boys and girls. And if you want to specify by gender, you just put an extra word there. So where it happens locally, it's conceived as the same thing. There is conceptual sameness. We have a problem when we compare these 2 practices, because as Elisa showed us just now, we have so many forms, from a mild pricking, which does not remove any tissue, to infibulation, where you cut away quite a lot of tissue and stitch to create, to take away an opening, to close the vagina. So the result is that procedures in girls that are clearly less invasive than what is done to boys are generally criminalized in Western countries. These are two of the most famous cases in the world. In Australia, defendants were convicted in district court. In Court of Appeal, they were acquitted because the court said we can't find any sign of harm done. We can't prove that any tissue has been removed. So they were acquitted, and later in High Court, they were convicted again. So that's how it ended, because something had been done which was perceived to be harmful to the girls, just having gone through the ritual. In the US, the case was dismissed. Correct me, Americans, if I'm wrong. The case was dismissed for legal, technical reasons. Correct. So, but in these two cases, to the best of my knowledge, there were no observable changes of the girls' genitals. So we seem to have a cultural readiness to see girls as victims, and also cultural reluctance to regard boys as victims. And it's not the case that circumcision of boys is always harmless. A few examples here. One from South Africa about boys being hospitalized. Some had their penises amputated, some died. Quite a few. A study regarding the US, estimates from a survey. And I don't know the figures from Norway, but in Sweden we have, from male circumcision, 1 death, several cases of near death, several cases in court for malpractice, where small or young boys have had serious harm from circumcision. So that was boys and girls' circumcisions. What is also discussed among scholars is surgery of intersex children, and that's children who are born with ambiguous genital characteristics. And the routine is to perform normalizing and, in effect, mutilating surgery in order to make a child genitally look like the assigned sex. And these surgeries are done for social reasons. There is no medical reason to do it. And there has been a lot of criticism, the main argument being that we have no way to predict the gender identity of the child in the future. So it's not a good thing for a child to grow up and feel identified with the sex where tissue has been taken away. So activism has been forceful. Protocols in many Western countries encourage surgeons to postpone surgery until the child is older and may give consent or may give signals about who he or she is. And needless to say, perhaps, many of these surgeries are more invasive than many forms of FGMC, which are criminalized. So, Elise said some things about cosmetic genital surgery. I give you a few examples. In Sweden, the clitoris lifts include removing clitoral tissue. And there is also a case from the UK where a British woman wanted her external clitoris removed, and she got it. So the anti-FGM laws in many countries prohibit any procedures changing the external female genitals, irrespective of age. And I say, and many people say, that this results in discriminatory implementation of legislation. And I'm going to give you an example here. We can think about an 18-year-old girl with one parent from Europe and one parent from Africa. Is this, if it is performed, is it a violation of FGM legislation? And is it reasonable to leave this decision to individual surgeons? The exception here among the Scandinavian countries is Denmark. They have the same law as in Sweden and Norway. Our laws are very similar, but the National Board of Health and Welfare in Denmark, they say that cosmetic genital surgery is not legal, not for women in Denmark, and they refer to the legislation. So I've talked to many Danish people about this, and they say there may be a gray zone. So if the doctor and patient can frame it as a truly medical issue, it can be done. If not, they have to cross the bridge and go to Sweden and have it done in our clinics. And Janice Body has written a wonderful paper about the fact that I think you're going to say something about it here next. This complicates the situation further, that we have increasing numbers of underage girls. So important work you're doing. So this was the slide I started with. It is complex, it is much discussed, and there is controversy. How should we deal with all this? I'm going to give you an example of a seminar we had in Sweden a month ago or something, 3 weeks. I'm going to read just how we framed it. Legislations in Western countries ban all forms of genital modifications in girls, while no country prohibits traditional procedures in boys. This inconsistency can be addressed from different perspectives. Why should boys not have the same legal protection as girls against non-medically motivated alterations of their genitals? Or you could pose the question, why should girls not enjoy the same opportunities as boys to be incorporated into cultural and religious communities through a ritual involving minor cutting of their genitals? And both panelists, Professor Schweder, American anthropologist, and Dr. Brian Earp, they agreed that there is a lack of gender equality here, but their solutions are different. So Professor Schweder says, we live in liberal, democratic, multi-ethnic societies. We have to accept in some groups that for the same reasons as we accept it for boys, we should accept minor, which procedures that do not cause harm, like a pricking, for example. That should be accepted. So let's both boys and girls have this right, while Dr. Brian Earp says, no, let's protect all children until they're old enough to make their own decisions. So these are the key issues. It's about gender equality. We have to solve that in some way. But it's also about equality before the law. regardless of ethnic background and color of skin. We need to be equal before the law. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, you can introduce it.
You can introduce me. But do I just, which button do I push to move the slide?
Because they're all glued together, so yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Just introduce yourself.
Oh, I'll just, okay. I'm going to just introduce myself, and you'll probably see this slide for far too long. But I'm Janice Boddy, and I'm a cultural anthropologist and a medical anthropologist. And I work in northern Sudan, and I have worked with and among Sudanese women there since 1976. And this is an area which traditionally practices what the WHO refers to as infibulation or type 3 female genital cutting, mutilation cutting, whatever you want. I'm going to frame my discussion with a couple of vignettes. The last time I was in Sudan in February 2018, I gave a talk at Afad University for Women in Omdurman, a leading institution promoting the abandonment of traditional FGC. My talk focused on the rise of female genital cosmetic surgeries, FGCS. These are very confusing acronyms. The rise of FGCS in the West, and I described some of its forms to my Sudanese audience, including the notorious Barbie labiaplasty, in which the labia minora are amputated, the labia majora are often reduced, and in some cases stitched together anteriorly for a centimeter or so to create a smooth, clean look. My audience in Afad's largest, and Ellen will know this, glitziest auditorium consisted of students, professors, activists, and a few European members of INGOs. As I finished speaking, I could see that several of them were uncomfortable. Quote, "But what you've described," a Sudanese student volunteered, "fits entirely within the World Health Organization typology for female genital mutilation as type 2 and even type 3 FGMC. How can your governments consider these operations legal while declaring that traditional forms of FGC are against the law?" Another said, "This is serious. It will give families a way to work around our efforts to abolish FGC." I could only agree with the verdict of hypocrisy and the dangers that FGCS entails. Although traditional FGC is regularly described in the Western press as barbaric, brutal, and oppressive. To quote an important new article by Ellen Grunbaum, who's speaking tomorrow, Brian Earp, whose picture you just saw, and Rick Schwader, the WHO deems FGC to reflect, quote, "deep-rooted inequality between the sexes characterized by male dominance," close quote, and to constitute, quote, "an extreme form of discrimination against women," close quote. They go on to observe what Sara, I, and others have long remarked, that virtually all societies that practice female genital cutting also practice male genital cutting for children of similar ages. And indeed, the terms are typically the same, either feminized or masculinized. Thus, Grunbaum, Earp, and Schwader conclude, girls are not being singled out for genital modification on account of their sex or gender. As pithy as this statement is, I'm not certain that it holds in the admittedly very different context of FGCS. In the West, rates of male circumcision performed for aesthetic or religious reasons have declined, while those for female genital surgeries have surged. Yet until recently, FGCS was seldom subject to critical scrutiny and outright condemnation, or regarded as a corollary of patriarchy. I beg to differ. FGCS does, I think, reflect patriarchal structures, but these are all but completely effaced by the neoliberal conceit of individual choice. FGCS is generally described by physicians who are authors of various papers, and this is now a real industry of papers being written about FGCS. They describe it as a matter of personal preference, an agentive act, while traditional FGC they describe as the reverse. On the professional website Medscape, labiaplasty is said to involve young women and girls who have procedures performed on the vulva against their will. Although just as medically unnecessary as FGC, FGCS is claimed to beautify, not to mutilate. It makes the female body more feminine. That traditional FGC may produce similar results, be practiced for aesthetic reasons, and be happily anticipated by some who undergo it, is either beyond these writers' understanding or conventionally overlooked. Indeed, I'd venture it's a symptom of racist bias. Moreover, as I'm sure many of us will agree, choice is a fraught concept. Our choices are ineluctably informed by our prevailing sociocultural ideals and norms. None of us, not your African victims of FGC or their parents, nor Western medically trained plastic surgeons, nor research anthropologists like me, is unconstrained by our cultural contexts. My Sudanese audience was clearly aware of such complexities. The sea change required of them to abolish traditional FGC entails a complex shift in familial behavior. And this leads to my second vignette. A couple of days after my address, I returned to Afad University to visit a faculty friend closely associated with the FGC abolition movement. I could see that she was distressed and now think that my talk had given her pause. She told me that over the past few months, several dejected, teary students, remember this is a university for women, several of her students had approached her for advice, girls whose parents had chosen not to have them cut. Each was upset that she did not look like other girls, that her appearance was not normal. In one heartbreaking incident, a young woman asked whether her parents could possibly love her, as they had forbidden her grandmother to have her cut. Quote, "They did khitan, circumcision, for my older sisters, and their bodies are beautiful, but they left me open and ugly." The student wanted to be cut, to be made normal, and had asked her professor to help. Although my friend did not approve of the student's request, FGCS may well provide a recourse for uncut Sudanese girls seeking normality. Sudanese girls' experiences of body shaming are certainly comparable to those of adolescents in the Americas or Europe who feel inadequate or are bullied by their peers because they're yet to be fully developed, labia appear asymmetrical, too large, not neatly tucked in, incompatible with the prepubescent look that has become the Western and indeed global media norm. The lines between FGC and FGCS are increasingly blurred. While traditional FGC is declining in parts of the world where it was once deeply embedded, FGCS is on the rise and performed in hundreds of clinics around the world. In 2020, the article that Sara was referring to, I found some 847 labiaplasty providers distributed over 68 countries, several of them in Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. The Aesthetic Society in the United States, formerly known as ASAPS, or the American Society of Aesthetic Plastic Surgeons, consists of fewer than 300 practitioners, but provides useful statistics. So I'm now going to try and give you a statistic. Good, there we go. So remember that these are only 300 people, or fewer actually. ASAPS notes that the numbers of labiaplasties carried out by its members have begun to level off preceding the COVID pandemic. These are the dates from 2015 to 2019. But they rose significantly in 2021. By over 36%, with more than 19,000 operations being performed. I do want to emphasize that not all US plastic surgeons belong to this society, and labiaplasties are provided by gynecologists and family practitioners as well. So these numbers are clearly underrepresentative even for the US. Crucial for comparing traditional FGC to medical FGCS is the age at which the operations are performed. Girls typically undergo traditional FGC between the ages of 6 and 10, though in some societies they do so at puberty or just before marriage. Although most who seek FGCS are adults, labiaplasty may be performed on girls as young as 10, well before their bodies are fully grown. Websites abound with teens voicing anxiety about their abnormal vulvas. Headlines read, "Doctors warn that teen labiaplasty is on the rise," and "More teenage girls are seeking genital cosmetic surgery." Doctors in Spain, reporting on 16 underage labiaplasty patients whose median age was 13.43 years of age, claimed that, quote, "hypertrophy of the labia minora is a growing problem in adolescence." Overgrowth, in other words, of the labia minora. Yet there's nothing to suggest that vulvar morphology has recently changed. Indeed, as some physicians and artists point out, there is and always has been a considerable range of variation in female genital appearance, both among women and for individual women through the life course. What has changed are societal norms, what I refer to as a sexual medical matrix, driven in part by the wide availability of sexual imagery on the internet and genital grooming techniques that, in requiring removal of vulval hair, make the labia more visible and may increase discomfort when exercising or wearing fashionably tight clothes. Between 2015 and 2017, ASAP's doctors had performed cosmetic labiaplasties on 1,428 girls aged 18 and younger. And in 2018, the figure was 491 girls aged 17 and under, owing to a change in data collection methods. After that year's, numbers for under 18s are reported as nil. So you can see, I'm sorry, maybe you can see it, it's big enough, it's not large on my screen, but if you just go down to labiaplasty, you'll see that it says nobody was performing these operations on underage girls in that year. I find this figure difficult to believe given previous trends, and there's little reason to doubt that a conservative 4% of labiaplasties in the US are performed on girls and teens. Similar observations have been made for the UK, Australia, and New Zealand, extrapolating from numbers of labiaplasties performed under national health insurance schemes, in full knowledge that most such operations take place in private practice, where reporting is not mandatory. In several regions where customary FGC is practiced, parents have turned to medical professionals to perform the operations. While medicalized FGC is vigorously resisted by international organizations, a desire to maintain hygienic standards, control the amount of tissue removed, and prevent complications has led parents to request that operations be conducted by doctors, nurses, or trained midwives. Many have complied, some for profit, others anxious that untrained practitioners could do a child greater harm. Significantly, as Kimani and Shell Duncan show in their 2018 article, rates of medicalized FGC are rising, and they are as high as 67% in Sudan. In Kenya, medicalization has undermined efforts encouraging total abandonment, a problem that my activist audience at AFAD was familiar with as well. An important 2019 study of health professionals and mothers of cut girls in Egypt shows that the language of cosmetic labiaplasty has been taken up by doctors and nurses there who perform FGC. Omaima El-Gibali and her team sought to understand the sharp rise in medicalized FGC among girls under age 19. They discovered that both male and female doctors, quote, repeatedly referred to beauty and ugliness in regard to girls' genitals, and indeed, many physicians who perform FGMC denied that they practiced FGMC, preferring to refer to the practice as a cosmetic operation instead. Here are some illuminating excerpts from their informants' statements. Quote, I don't call it circumcision, I call it refinement. For me as a doctor, I don't do this as a case of female circumcision, I do it as a technical case. I do this as a refinement or cosmetic operation. 2, this is not considered circumcision. You are beautifying the labia. It's normal. And 3, look, the normal size is that when the labia majora are closed, nothing is protruding from them. If there are protrusions outside the labia majora, there would be a need to cut the girl. As El-Gibali and her collaborators note, this reframing of FGC as cosmetic surgery serves to legitimate the practice. It offers a way to promote it to mothers while circumventing Egypt's law against FGMC, which does not penalize FGCS among women over the age of 18. To end, let me return to my AFAD audience's concerns. Labiaplasties that are performed mainly on white girls and women in Western countries. And I say this knowingly because I did a search of as many before and after pictures as I could, and I went through over 500 of them, and I could only find 2 that were being performed on bodies that could be considered brown or black. So it offers a way to promote it to mothers while circumventing the law. Sorry, I'm losing my place here. Labiaplasties that are performed mainly on white girls and women in Western countries elude the legal sanctions imposed on equally medically unnecessary genital modifications performed on girls in African and Asian diasporic communities, even when the procedure is as mild as a nick to the clitoral hood and could be considered vital to a girl's psychological and well-being and community membership. This blind spot is an example of what feminist Isabel Gunning refers to as arrogant perception, and Nikki Sullivan calls white optics, an embodied historically and culturally specific, ultimately racist and colonial way of knowing and being that empowers elites to see others as culturally different while obscuring the fact that they themselves are culturally formed. Hegemonic Western constructs are naturalized, imbued with ontological certainty, so becoming taken for granted, and thus both inevitable and invisible. What is hidden is gender discrimination, a pervasive sense that the female body is defective and in need of management and control, as well as a deep-seated racism that privileges Western body modifications as matters of simple personal choice. So my conundrum, how can we stand by as Western systems differentiate legally and ethically between FGC and FGCS when issues such as underage consent, choice, cultural aesthetics, and political context so thoroughly overlap? Thank you.
Jonas,
Did I?
you can take a seat if you want.
Okay.
You can take a seat if you want.
Yes. Oh, over there.
Yes. Thank you so much for that. I think this is going to be a heated one, you know. Vice versa, the first was so cute. Now I'm going to introduce the panel. That's why she's taking a seat because we're going to join you very soon. So I'm going to welcome Sara Johnsdotter. If you can also... Yeah, when I introduce everyone, you go and do your presentation, because you also have a PowerPoint, right? One slide. Okay, so maybe everyone can just come up that I just mentioned. Yeah, and Vanya as well. So Janice Body, Vanya Johnson, and Johanne Sundby are with us in the panel discussion tonight. Vil du ha? Du har. Yeah, that's what I said when I first saw her. Yes, please introduce yourself and your work. Yep.
I'm an obstetrician, so I don't deal with men at all. But when I was a young clinician, we did the morning after circumcision of boys that were born during the night. So the youngest surgeon in the clinic would go to the operating theater and take the boys. They would circumcise newborn baby boys. So would I. So I have a practical experience in circumcision of boys. I didn't like it. I felt awkward doing it. Those were the days where people were a little bit more relaxed about anesthesia and painkillers and things like that. And the baby boys were crying. They were removed from the mothers. But there was a great demand. I mean, the families of those boys, they wanted it done. And it was done in the public services in the morning. So I was asked by Elise to talk about circumcision of men. So I don't think I'm the right person to talk about it, but I am still maybe somebody who can do it. So circumcision of men is a completely different paradigm because, as has been said already, male circumcision is much more directly linked to religious doctrines. There is a strong link between Islam and circumcision of boys, and there's a strong link between Judaism. Jews do circumcise their boys. And it is a religious kind of practice. It's not maybe demanded by the religions, but it's done within those contexts. That's why it's being done. Circumcising the boys make them a Muslim or a Jew. But those are not the only ones, because circumcision of boys is also done to a lot of other men. And it's done for something as pragmatic as hygienic reasons. In the US, for instance, it's believed that it's more clean for a man to be circumcised than to be uncircumcised. So they cut them. As has been said, the procedure is not completely without any dangers. There are casualties, both boys that die from this and small penises that have to be amputated, and then some severe infections. And of course the pain. But it's being done. It's being done, it's being done. It's being done by surgeons, gynecologists, and lay people. And then there is another driving force for circumcision of men, and that is the AIDS epidemic. Some people found that circumcised men probably were less likely to be infected by the HIV virus. So they recommended that men in high-risk zones, for instance, sub-Saharan Africa, should circumcise themselves to prevent HIV transmission. It was recommended to be a practice that should be implemented. Now, using a condom would probably give the same results. But it wasn't promoted equally. It was actually a surgical procedure that was taught to medical doctors and implemented in African countries. So there is this hygienic argument, as I said, the hygienic argument taken to the far extreme to be an HIV preventive procedure. And then there is this religious argument, and then there is this massive research on how beneficial circumcision is for men. That research is maybe the only really serious research that I've seen on the procedure. There's some people who have this almost like we are against female genital mutilation. They are for male circumcision, and they do a lot of research to prove that it's not harmful. And that's where we are. There's not a lot of research. There is quite some critical research that says, leave it to the boys to decide for themselves when they're 18, just like we recommend for all other procedures that are non-reversible. But that's not happening as I know it. We're still circumcising boys. Thank you.
Vanya? Yeah. You also want to talk a little bit and introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. So my name is Vanya Johnson, and I'm a medical student at the University of Oslo. I'm on my last year. And I'm also a sexual educator. So I provide information about sexuality at high schools, and also I work with immigrants, both male and female, religious groups, and other. And since 5 years back, I've also worked at a Oslo plastic surgery clinic, which is a clinic, performing, amongst other things, also female genital surgery. So, and during my work there, I've came across a lot of women coming to us and wanting different kinds of genital surgery. And I think that it's very interesting to see how, we assess what we do when it comes to actually, performing the different kinds of surgery, and what is accepted and what is not. Because by today we have, some criteria that we usually look at least at the place I'm working at. And I think that it's also very different from country to country what is actually being followed. Because in Norway, as we heard a little bit about ASAPS, which is the American Society, but in Norway we also have National Society for Plastic Surgeons. And they're pretty, they still have a bit more of guidelines about, for instance, age and other aspects of the genital surgery. But of course, again, this is guidelines. It's not something written by law, and that is quite an interesting topic to be a part of. And further on, I've also been involved in doing some research about female genital surgery, and there we found out some interesting results, of course, and I would like to highlight some of them with you. And one of the things is that the mean age in Norway is 30 years for performing genital surgery. So thinking that all of these people that come to our clinics are, 18-year-old girls or even younger, that is not always the truth, at least for us. And another thing is that the motivations for cosmetic surgery were usually mostly cosmetic, of course, and then we have like the physical aspect of wearing tight clothes and feeling uncomfortable, and then we had one part that was the emotional part, and that included media, pornography, and comments from sexual partners, and how that implemented on their thinking of their own vulva. So, I guess that's a short introduction. So,
yeah, because actually, thank you so much, because I'm just going to shoot straight into this. I'm so excited about this topic, because what I find very interesting is that you say people have like emotional and mental. There is a mental aspect to this with cosmetic surgery. So if my immediate question is like, as a woman above 18, but I have not reached 30 yet, if I go there and I'm crying my eyes out and I'm saying like one of my labias, like inner lips or outer lips, is much bigger than the other, so my boyfriend mistaken it for a penis when we were first having sex, like I need help, like I really need you guys to help me with this, right? Would you guys shut me down, or is it a gray area where you would maybe allow? Have there been cases like that where you would allow because somebody is very struggling with this mental aspect of things?
I think it's quite important to, in general, when talking about plastic surgery, is like, is it actually necessarily, like if you have, for instance, one breast that's bigger than the other, is it medically necessary to reduce that? But of course, I mean, there's a lot of gray areas about it, but at the end of the day, if it enhances your well-being, I think it's, that's where we start, coming into the gray area, of course. And I think that for us, for instance, we usually evaluate by age, that you have to be 18. It's about anatomical extent, which I can talk a bit more about, but usually you don't go into like the erectile tissue, like you don't remove the clitoris. You might remove the clitoral hood, you might remove, parts of the labia, but you wouldn't necessarily go deeper than that. And also another really important thing is informed consent, because I feel like a lot of young girls, they don't know, okay, what are the consequences of me having this procedure, but actually being the doctor that explains, like, if we do this, these are the consequences, these are the risks. And that is quite important, I think.
Yeah, okay, so they're not normally just 30, they can also be 18 and above.
Yeah, of course. And then also it's about, the follow-up and everything, because it's not like you perform the surgery and then you just let them, out in the free. Of course, you have follow-ups, and if there is any harm, you try to fix that. It's not as black and white, perhaps, as one might think.
Yeah, obviously. That's why we're here, girl. Like, I'm thinking, you also have something, because I want to ask, actually, you a question, but you want to shoot in?
Yeah, I remember I said I have been a surgeon, so I've done a lot of surgeries.
Yeah.
And I would say that my agenda now is to try to reduce the surgical approach to things. I'd rather use different types of approaches. I'll give you one anecdotal. I used to work in a sexual health clinic for young people in Oslo, and I would have patients, girls, that came to me and said, I don't like the way I look down there, and my boyfriend says, I don't look nice. And I would say, I hope I have seen more vaginas than your boyfriend, because I think you look quite okay.
Sorry, but yeah.
And sometimes, quite often, they would think twice. They would say, maybe he's wrong. In Norway, we call it a mus. Og de jentene ville komme og si, kjæresten sier ja, flaggermus. That means floppy vagina.
Batter, yeah.
That's the terminology they would use sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's possible to talk them out of it again.
Yeah, wow, that's actually great. Okay, so some would argue there is a legal and illegal aspect to this. Where would you guys think the line should be drawn when it comes to female genital cutting and female genital, surgery? Where is the legal and illegal line drawn? Because, okay. Oh my God, okay.
What were you going to say?
No. But
I'm not sure. I mean, you're growing. What I was most worried about are the numbers of girls who are being cut before they're fully grown and before they can actually make a decision for themselves, and who are being influenced by media, who are, maybe their mothers are not accepting that their daughters' bodies are changing in the way that they see them changing. They're concerned for the girls, and they want to make sure that they're actually normal. I mean, it's the underage operations that bother me the most. If you're over 18 and you want to make a choice to do this, I think you could, but I really want us to think very hard about what it means to make a choice.
Damn, let's deep that. Yeah. It's actually true. Because what I find, where the gray area comes along is that FGM, we say that, okay, well, it is barbaric and it's mutilation, but surgery, it's cosmetic, it's elegant, it's looking pretty. But is it actually autonomy? What autonomy does the woman have when she goes and says, well, I want to be cut?
Well, exactly. I mean, that's why I'm actually pushing this notion that we have to be very careful about what autonomy means, what choice means, because we're all very influenced by the moment and the culture in which we live. And, when I was growing up, labiaplasty was not even a thought. It wasn't on the horizon. And now that you have internet pornography, you have a lot of these new grooming techniques that are not that new, but typically, Brazilian waxing and that sort of thing. Yeah. Removing hair that was once protective of of genital tissue, makes it much more vulnerable, subject to chafing, and may look unsightly in typically tight fashions. So fashion has a lot to do with it, media has a lot to do with it. The times in which we live, the culture is changing constantly.
Yeah, it is changing constantly, and that's what Nene said about, well, I didn't think about it because mine was working and functioning as it should, basically. So these boyfriends are also very, very problematic. Yeah. Sorry. So what, as a researcher and author and, somebody that works with this, what would you say has been one of the things that, when it comes to boys and cutting, do you think that there are similarities with women and female genital and like the boys cutting? Is there any similarities and differences, or should we always be like, well, because this is not allowed, the other shouldn't be allowed? Is there any instance boy cutting should be allowed?
Why, this is a gray area.
I think it's difficult, but I think it needs to be discussed.
Yeah.
Because how we talk about circumcision of girl or female genital mutilation is often exaggerating the harms and the complications, and overlooking the fact that many circumcised women live well being circumcised. So we have the situation of exaggerating the complications on what is done to girls, while we are silencing the complications for boys. So a discussion about both.
Yeah, so you would say that, but okay, let me understand you correctly. You're saying that FGM is basically the health consequences of it is exaggerated, and it's maybe not as bad as people think because women live okay with it.
No,
but
not all women. No, that's not.
No.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
No.
Good.
Yeah, for boys and girls,
Yes.
sometimes things go wrong and there are complications,
Yeah.
and children die because of it.
Yeah.
But that is true for boys and girls. And we need to discuss both genders and how we can treat them equally
Yeah.
as members of religious and cultural communities, but also as potential victims.
But, so my question to you again, I'm sorry, is why, or maybe anybody would want to respond to this, is that where is the gender equality when it comes to boycotting and female genital mutilation? Is there any, should there be a gender equality, or shouldn't it be? And if so, why? Because if we need to like compare these two, right? If you want to discuss it. Yeah. Yes? Oh, this is great, yeah.
Can I say something?
Yes, please do.
No, I just get a lot of ideas. Because what Sara did was excellent. She brought the different types together, put them side by side. Yeah. And what I think...
Oh, you have a mic now.
Okay.
Okay, girl.
Well, is that it has been compartmentalized. It's been kept apart, so that one has not discussed it really in connection with each other. Like female surgery, it may, as Jenny's body said, has arose from some kind of norms that has come from pornography, which has been developed independent, not as a result of female genital cutting or any thinking about it at all, because that has come in from another side. And then suddenly we have two types of traditions, and they like parallel.
But they're not exactly parallel.
But they are not seen together.
They need to be, because they are in fact overlapping.
Yes, they need to be, because that's what she did. And that is why they are compartmentalized. We have to break the borders between them and see them together, because we need equal. The law has to be equal for all.
Yes, exactly.
Don't we think we need certain principles, and that is not to do any harm.
Exactly.
So I think you did the right thing. And then we need to go to the politicians, because they don't see things together. They are just confused. They don't understand it.
Yeah.
Because they don't see it as clearly as you showed it. All of you showed the resemblance. This is resembling each other. And so then it turns out to be discrimination against black women. But it's not meant to be. But it turns up to be, because there are different standards in different to the different procedures.
Yeah, exactly. Because thank you so much. That was very, very great. Thank you. Because one of the, like I said, the headlines of that magazine was a woman. It said FGM, and then it was a black woman with a hijab. So it's very problematic. And gender equality for boys cutting an FGM is very, very important. Because I've worked actually with some boys that also told me that they were cut. Their struggles as well. And I think nobody speaks about it, really. So gender equality is needed to not do any harm until people can actually consent. But is there any consent age, would you say? Or is it like we follow the European standard of like 18, Also, before you reply to that, you wanted to say something. Oh, you also want to say something? This is great. Okay, can you go first?
So my take on that is that we're born with relatively rational bodies. They're functional.
Yeah.
They have things for a purpose. And so the reasons why we modify them is either because there's something medically wrong, and that happens sometimes. Some things go wrong sometimes, so we have to do something. That's why we have developed surgery. And then we have all these cultural things that we put, that we are influenced by, and that's different in different countries. When I was an exchange student in the US, when I was 17 years old, I was kind of like, look at her ugly legs. She's got hairy legs. Oh
my God, I'm so happy I shaved today.
Yeah, but I came from Norway in
Yeah.
the 70s, and my legs were hairy, and I had to go home and shave. Now, shaving hair is not irreversible. I did it because I wanted to comply with the standards of that school that I went to when I was 17. Now I wouldn't, because I'm much more brave. I mean, I'm much more vulnerable when I'm a tiny little teenager than I am an old lady.
You also said, Bob.
So I think as I said, I'm a bit reluctant to
surgery,
the surgical procedures, to things. Now we have a lot of people who want to change their sex.
Yeah.
They do a lot of manipulation of their genitals surgically.
Yeah.
And it's irreversible, and we are doing it, and we don't know the long-term outcomes of it.
Yeah.
We have no idea.
Actually, 83% of the ones that did this regretted it in afterthought, which is some statistics for me that is very, very high. But yes, you wanted to say something.
I just wanted to, I appreciate the way that we're trying to look at these questions. And I do know that they're very different in different contexts. And that's part of what we all are talking about, I think, when we research this for any length of time, is the need to continue the dialogue, as Sara said, because, for example, they had a couple of studies in Kenya that suggested a few men who got circumcised were slightly less likely to contract HIV from females. Okay, so that doesn't necessarily lead you to conclude all men everywhere should be circumcised, regardless of condom use or regardless of sexual orientation or whatever. So I think that we have to be really careful when we look at those issues. And I have argued that in some cases, it may be more important to work on one or the other first. And so to try to have one law for the entire planet may not be the right thing at any given point in time. It may be that male circumcision is highly resisted and highly protected, in some country that also has a fairly damaging or serious female genital cutting tradition. So you need to not just say, it's all the same, but let's say, what should we do first? What are the priorities? And how can we go about really letting people discuss what's important at that point in time from their from their cultural perspectives. And just the last thing that I think that's brought up really well is the issue of how body shaming has played a role. And I know that there has been body shaming with, as you mentioned, it can go for male circumcision. I remember when I was a young student, my first trip to Europe and seeing uncircumcised males, this was quite a shock to me. And I thought, wow, why would they leave them like that? And yet, later on, I came to think totally differently about it. And I really, and so for my own sons, I protected them from being circumcised as infants. So it's, it depends on a lot about those kind of perspectives of what we've been used to and what has been shamed.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. That was great. You wanted to say, and then you can go. Yeah.
Yes, I think I'm going to say something close to what Ellen says. I think this is not an easy dilemma to solve because we have political realities. And they say that it was possible on a global level to ban FGM because it mainly takes place in Africa and Asia. It's so much easier to call Africans barbarians than to call American barbarians. So it is.
Very, very true.
So also in all Western countries, we have religious and cultural minorities who cherish this tradition. So, like you say, it's not easy. It's perhaps not feasible. But I think that we still need to put the practices side by side and discuss them and see the ethnocentrism built in. Who are barbarians and why? And how did we come to compartmentalize it? I didn't say that correctly. But why? On what grounds?
Yeah.
That needs to be discussed. But it's not an easy dilemma to solve.
Obviously not, and that's why we
for
have
political reasons.
Obviously, and this is why we keep these discussions alive. And like somebody pointed out, a new girl is getting born every day, so we can't not talk about these things. And it's going to always be some gray areas, obviously. And you wanted to say something?
Yeah, about having different laws in different countries. That's quite interesting because there's a term called medical tourism. Where you go to another country to get surgery performed. And that is very common in plastic surgery especially. And that's very common in Norway even. We perform certain surgeries, but we don't give them, for instance, if you're going to enhance your buttocks, we don't do it as much as they would do if you went to Turkey or somewhere else, for instance. And that's also a problem by having different laws that today it's so easy to book a flight, go there, get it performed, come back, and no one will know. And that's kind of the problem too about having different laws. I think that if there should be a law, there should be at least some similarities or some things that everyone agrees upon. And then, of course, every country can have their own twitches of that, but having entirely different laws, like having one neighboring country saying, no, it's going to be totally illegal, while the other one says, oh, no, we're open for it. Then we'll just have like Denmark and Sweden. So you'll just go, above the bridge from Copenhagen to Malmö and you'll be performing it. I mean, it's kind of, So I think it's hard. I think there should be some consensus in general before.
Interesting, yeah. That would be, of course, easier. But obviously, as a person of color sitting here with, a Muslim background, I also feel often that there is, don't come for me, but, this white of dogma where it's the white men setting the law or the white people in Western countries that are maybe actually enforcing these thoughts or gray areas. And, the U.S. is a hegemony, which basically means they're the ones with the media and the coverage and, who is writing in the newspapers. So if we are supposed to have a consensus, which I kind of agree, like harmony, perfect, but who will do that? whose responsibility is it to create this consensus? And how can we actually practically do it?
Difficult question.
I know, where's the UN leaders, when we need them?
I mean, the one thing that really always gets me is that, if you create the problem, then a plastic surgeon is there to solve it.
Yeah.
The plastic surgery started out as such a with such laudable aims.
Yeah, healthy.
But to restore people to health, to normal, appearance.
Victim of wars. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. But it has become such an industry that, and it's not really as subject, it seems, to the same medical ethical standards as, say, gynecology or family practice or any of the others. Somehow the plastic surgeons manage, if you read any of the articles about labiaplasty, for instance, or any of the other interventions, you'll see that the people most likely to do it are plastic surgeons, and those least likely to do it are gynecologists and family practitioners.
Yeah.
Because we don't know what harms the future holds for these people who are undergoing labiaplasty. If you get a labiaplasty at age 20 and then you become pregnant, what happens? We don't know. There's not enough information about the results. Are you going to have perineal tears much more frequently? I mean, there are all kinds of things that we need to be thinking about, and we don't have that information. Yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
I would just like to say that the WHO should play a key role when it comes to how to draw the line between cosmetic surgery and FGM. But the WHO also has very clearly double standards when it comes to
Boycotting.
boys and girls. They support the mass circumcisions around the world for boys.
They do.
While they prohibit
people,
even a pricking that doesn't take away any tissue in a girl. So also inside the WHO, they need to sort some things out, I think.
Yeah, you wanted to say something.
I was just thinking about, when we talk about, what harm we will make, we always think about like the physical harm, but sometimes we forget about like the psychological effects of it too. Because having, for instance, every time you're going to have, sexual relations with your partner, if every time you're thinking about it, if every time for 20, 30 years you've been sitting there thinking about it and having this awful experience, what if that one surgery about removing 1 centimeter from your labia can make you psychologically feel super like sexually, enhanced and everything. And I think that's kind of one thing that is also being kind of looked down at. Maybe especially also from like gynecologists, why? Well, you're normal. Well, how would I know if I'm normal if everything I see is pornography? For instance, in Norway, where do you see other naked women? Like
in gynecology.
Exactly, in gynecology. But you don't, like, as, being a young woman myself, like, where have I seen vulvas? Sure, I'm a medical student, of course, but usually we don't see other women.
This is...
that's not exactly true anymore. Would you... Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say that I work with families in Sudan who watch pornography, American-produced pornography, on their cell phones.
I mean, apart from pornography, of course.
Apart from pornography, where do we normally see this? Actually, this is very interesting that you ask, because but like also in the gym, like we don't sit like
exactly.
So we can't. But the thing is, actually, my friend and I'm sorry, you know what? I'm not going to mention her name. But she actually, we were two of us, and one that is almost graduating from medical school now, and me, and then there was this girl, and she was like, guys, actually, I really hate pornography because it makes me feel unnormal. And so, because you guys are my girls, I need you guys to check if I'm normal. And I'm like, wait, what do you mean you're normal? And she's like, no, normal down there. And I'm like, oh, and then she showed us, it's like, she's like, okay, so look at my lips, and, am I normal? And obviously we can't encourage also friends to be the victims of each other's genitalia, you know? But I'm just, who has the, I'm sorry, but it's true, you know? Like, who has the responsibility?
Yeah.
But where should we go? But if we want to learn about genitalia and how it looks and how yours and everybody, like, I'm saying that specifically, yours, but you know.
But we did that some 20 years ago.
Yeah. What did we do?
Educate ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did.
Oh,
Yes.
really?
In the 70s that put out books and did lecture tours with pictures of labia.
Exactly.
And it's all fallen by the wayside.
Yeah.
And now you have to get it from your cosmetic surgeon's website. It shows you the before and after. It shows you the most asymmetrical.
Yeah.
And it shows you the one that looks like a newborn. I mean, it seems really strange. If you, Janice looked at them.
Yes, more than I wanted to.
But we have more experience with the breast.
Yeah,
Yes.
we do.
And we have a lot of people who want to change their breasts,
Yeah.
even if it does change your ability to breastfeed.
Yeah.
Young girls want to have bigger breasts, and some old women want to have smaller breasts.
Yeah, yeah.
I've done that type of surgery too. So we do have some information about variation, at least.
Yeah.
But also, I think it's kind of not true always that you want this Barbie
Looking.
a vulva or vagina, because you always, for instance, when they come to us, oh, but I still want to look normal. It's like, oh, I want a reduction, but I still want it to look like I haven't had anything done.
Exactly.
So it's like it's not always about having this super small newborn type look. Not at all. I would say that a lot of times, maybe if you reduce the labia, for instance, you don't reduce it all the way. You reduce it to, for instance, halfway, and that could be normal for someone else. So, I mean, that is also one aspect I think that is forgotten about it, because usually we want to feel normal, but of course, how do you know what normal is?
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
that is
Actually, yeah, this,
absolutely...
you wanted to point.
I would like to ask a question
of
to you.
course.
This example you gave with 1 centimeter
Yeah.
reduction of the labia. If a Somali girl, 20 years old, would she be able to do it at your clinic?
If she was 20 years old, if she consented to it, and if she, I think she would be able to, yeah.
Okay.
So you're basically asking, is there any stigma towards specific groups like that come from female genital mutilation, if they want to perform cosmetic surgeries, if they're more like the surgeons are reluctant?
I haven't studied this, so I'm speculating. But I think that a surgeon in Sweden would not dare to genitally remove things from a black woman because they would expect reporters to be there the next week to talk about FGM at Swedish clinics.
Oh, we have had several women of color that have performed
Yeah,
surgery. Yeah, I mean, that haven't been circumcised before, and they come in and they're 30, 40 years old, and they have it performed. So I think that's a misconception, in my opinion.
Yeah, I've also
that
heard
it's-
something similar, actually.
Yeah.
That a black woman did the same. She went to
Yeah.
a surgeon, and then he actually was also like, yeah, I think you should remove this too and fix that, you know, like so.
Of course.
Of course,
Yeah.
but that's
It
also when,
happens.
you know, you're, as a doctor, there's doctors and doctors, you know. There's some that, no, but
Exactly.
they are, you know.
Very,
Of course,
very
we can always talk about, like, economically, like, if you have your own plastic surgery clinic, why would you say no to some people and, you know, yes
money.
to others?
It's more money involved.
Yeah, of course. And that's, I mean, but that's the problem in all plastic surgeries, not only like labial reduction. You know, oh, why would you turn down someone who wants to enhance their breasts or enhance something else, you know? But I mean, that's up to, I mean, that's like the ethical question about also being a doctor. Like, what will you be willing to do and what not?
Yeah,
So, I
exactly.
mean, that's a way bigger discussion, you know?
It is actually, yeah. Oh my God. Okay, so there is somebody in the audience that wanna say something.
Wonderful panelists today. My name is Benta, African Norwegian here. I have a question to Sara Johnsdotter. She spoke of intersex. maybe I'm misunderstood. I'm very much obliged to learn more about that because our area, we happen to have a project in Kenya. Our area of operation has a lot of intersex, meaning the intersex I'm talking about, both man, a boy is born with both sexes. Is that what you are referring to?
There's so many.
Yes, we have a lot, so I wanted to know how we can help those ones. My question is that also we run workshops like discussions here. There's a question that now the African Norwegians that we work with, they have been raising, that I don't know, it's very, very sensitive. So we talk about cutting of the girls. And in Norwegian law, there's also transgender on girls, on the children. I don't know whether you have heard. The parents can group them between 8 years to 13. They can start transforming them to dress like a boy or dress like a girl. Between 13, that was discussed in New York with one of the conference. When before they reach 18, they can perform the transformation, just pushing that to the doctors. Is that a cross-cutting issue, FGM, which is more, well, which is more worse than FGM, than also doing transgender performance operation on girls before they're 18? Is that true or it is a lie?
That is a very interesting question. Very topical. I don't know if you've had the discussion in Norway as we have in Sweden. We have had very generous protocols when it comes to surgeries for transgender youth.
We do here too.
Yeah, and now they have how do you say it? They have changed the protocols. They're more conservative today than they were a year ago.
In Sweden?
Yes, in Sweden. So it's a very interesting question, and I think it will be interesting to see in the future whether this wave of transgender surgeries that have been done in the West, how it will be discussed in the future. Because there have been few follow-ups and amazing numbers of young, especially girls. Yes. So this will probably be critically discussed in decades to come, I think.
Yeah.
Very good point here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You also have a question, somebody in the audience?
It's actually more a comment, and it's not to the intricacy of what we are discussing now, but just to clarify a point. Pricking and making one blood in a genital of a girl, it will not be covered by the law against FGM in Norway, because it's only with lasting changes. And if it's just it's not recommended, but it's not against the law. Secondly, Sara, you said that WHO should ban something. WHO does not ban. National laws ban.
Okay.
WHO recommends, just to clarify that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. They put a lot of effort into their recommendation.
They do, but they don't make the laws. There's been a confusion, I think, about the law, so I just
metaphorically banning.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for clarification. Actually, I wasn't aware, so I probably needed that. Yeah. No. Okay, so to close up, you guys get, since I'm generous, 1 minute, 1 minute, 1 minute. If you have some closing arguments, can we start with you, please? If there's anything that we can have as a take-home message from your work or your experiences of this topic, what would it be?
I would re-emphasize what I started out with, and that is that surgeries do not solve all the problems. They're more irreversible than talking to people and trying to raise awareness and trying to raise consciousness around who you are and who you want to be, and that there could be a much bigger variety in whatever. I mean, if I say dirty words, nobody would suture up my mouth. It would be against all cultures to do that. But we suture up the lips that we have down there. And we have to talk. That's my comment.
Do you have any closing arguments?
Yeah, well, I agree that, of course, talking and informing is super important, but I also think that we shouldn't forget that there are some people that are consenting to this and actually want to have it performed, whether it be cultural or aesthetic reasons or other reasons for that matter. And I think it's quite hard when there are different laws in different countries. And I think that we should also not be too judgmental about people who are willingly choosing to have it performed, especially at an adult age. I think that that is quite important too.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, important, yeah. And you, Sara, any closing arguments?
I also think talking is important. So I would say let's keep talking about all these procedures and talk openly about it and not on beforehand decide what's a morally good position and what's a morally bad position, but just keep talking about all these issues.
Dialogue.
They're complex.
Like Sophia Kukui said. Yeah, for sure.
Me?
Yes.
Well, I think I would just emphasize that we really need to be investigating what we mean when we say choice.
Exactly.
And, sorry, I'll just harp on that one.
Yeah, very good. Very, very true. Yeah. That's perfect.
Great.
Very perfect. And I like I said, I'll just shoot in, And I just wanted to say that my sister gave me a great advice, because the thing is, when my friend showed me hers, I was like, well, how do I look like? And when I got home, I was comparing myself with my friend. And so my sister said, every day when you wake up, go to the mirror naked and admire yourself, your body, everything. Look at it and talk to her, every part of her. And to be honest, I got a choice that was very healthy, and that was to love my own body just the way the abnormalities was, and I felt sexy as hell. So I'm just saying, yeah. So choose to love ourselves. So thank you so much to everyone, and can we just, everybody get up from the great thing that holds us down? Yep. I just wanted to thank you for coming here, for the guys, for the women, and everything. You guys are so cute, by the way. And sorry if you're sister and brother. And I just wanted to thank the arrangers and everybody that came to partake in this very important discussion, and obviously everyone that was in the panel discussion. Just applause to everyone. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Perfect.
Thank you.
Yes, safe journey. Yeah.